Pretty much agree with all of it. I think. I don't know. The only thing I wasn't sure about was the idea that the voice in your head is not. I do think, like, when I learned to obey my own instinct, it took me a long time because I used to be more affected by what people said to me, and then I began to listen to the voice in the back of my head that I felt was observing aspects of my life, and you know, not, it wouldn't necessarily like feel like it gave advice, but sort of that thing in my head that would scrutinize my own behavior or scrutinize things from the past, and like sort of think about either the future or how or what that means or whatever. I came to think
Okay,
of it
so
that
that's
way.
very interesting. We could maybe like focus on this a bit. Why isn't so? So you would equate that to the Platonic daemon?
I feel like by learning to obey my instinct and ignoring other people, I was better off, and it was like a kind of guidance, a thing I could grab onto, like, you know, that was invisible, but in my head already. Yeah.
So my question would be, why do you distinguish between that and yourself? Why is that not you?
It's not something I can say absolutely, but it's more like, because some of these things were very inexplicable and not things I felt like I would or should know. It'd be hard to explain, but it would be like,
See, I understand where the difference in our perspective is from now, just by you saying that. Yeah. See, I would simply say that's what we are, and the information, you just mentioned there that there's information that you wouldn't know, but as consciousness, we are, as I like to say, as souls, we are portions of that great spirit that we call God. So we have all potential answers within us, and therefore, from my perspective, that would just be something arising from within ourselves. I wouldn't see it as a separate daemon or what have you. So for me, this is very interesting to see how you can experience the same phenomenon. And this is what you see, of course, historically with different traditions. Mystics have experienced the same phenomenon, but they express it differently according to the way they understand it and according to the parameters of their own tradition. So I find that very fascinating, because when you mentioned that in the beginning with the Alan Watts quote, and I tried to express it referring to the Upanishads, and you said, no, I don't think that's what Alan Watts was referring to. I think he was referring to a daemon. At that point, I was a little bit lost. But now that you've said that, I understand exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, because it definitely felt like, I saw that too. Was it? It was Platon, I think, who said, or was it Plato? Maybe it was Plato. That life is like experience in life is, or learning is like remembering things you already knew. This is a very reincarnation type idea, I guess. It's not like fresh new information. It's like you're remembering.
Oh yes, that's what I call, what others might call a self-discovery. I call it remembrance, because so often in life you learn, you seem to learn new things, but actually it's more like remembering them, just like Plato said. What's interesting to me about Plato and Aristotle and Pythagoras is that, like this, I don't know how familiar you are with the skeptic community, like here on YouTube, or that used to exist anyway. They're a bit fragmented.
You broke up, sorry. Sorry? I broke up or you broke up. You would just repeat, after Aristotle, repeat. Sorry, you broke up for me.
What fascinates me is that I don't know how familiar you are with the skeptic community here on YouTube or generally.
Yeah, it's the skeptics. Is this the atheist skeptics? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
I was an atheist for a while. I used to get into the Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens videos and be like, yeah, go get him. That's what led me down various roads in many ways to begin with. But yeah, I understand. I'm aware of them, and I would long ago gave up on them. But yeah, go on. I know about them.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that they'll evoke figures like Plato and Aristotle and Pythagoras as if they were ice-cold rationalists like themselves. But the reality is they were rather close to mystics. I remember that Plato wrote about the journey of the soul and all the phases it goes through in the afterlife. These were not
story of error.
Yeah, these were not the ancient equivalent of the new atheists by any stretch of the imagination, and it just amuses me how they're used in that way.
No, I mean most of Plato's and Plotinus's arguments are just talking about God or finding your way around about to God rationally. So in that sense, I mean, I would think of both of them as mystics, although according to your criteria from earlier, that's because they're more like theologians, but they're like theological mystics, maybe, let's say, because they did have I mean, like you said, the story of error in Plato is very just like a mystical revelation. No, that's what I remember from reading when I first read the Republic when I was young. The preface was all about this guy was bitching. How dare you even like begin to criticize someone like Plato? It's just the gall, like to think about it, let alone such some random nobody who wrote a preface to a book. I don't forget who he was at the time, but he said, yeah, Socrates outlines this whole rationale for questioning everything in the world, which that's what the skeptics like, because you question everything, all the time, right?
Yeah.
So you can't take dogma on the face of it, sort of thing. But then he has a very disappointing ending where he has the revelation of error, and it's all about reincarnation, the wheel of reincarnation, and all this. And like he starts complaining about this is the conclusion to Plato's writing, and like he just decides he doesn't like it and gives you a warning before you read the book that it ends badly though. But that's what it all was leading up to. It was leading up to a spiritual revelation. It was not leading up to atheism or skepticism or
Yeah.
For God's
And
sake.
that's why it amuses me so much to hear those names abused in the so-called skeptic community, because it just shows a lack of familiarity. As you said, it's not as if this stuff is hidden. It's there on the surface. I often think they're just essentially name dropping those figures that they've never really taken the time to study to any great degree.
Yeah. Well, if you're a skeptic, I guess you're continually battling. They're mostly battling Christians, I suppose. I would imagine. Are they not? Or
Yeah, they're still the safe target for sure.
yeah, exactly. So that's their main opponent. So they'll take any non-Christian writing more easily than they would a Christian one, I guess, maybe to use as an attack if they can. I believe it reminds me of that guy Stefan Molyneux. He would be a great.
Oh, I think you've cut out again.
Whoops. Oh. Yeah, the connection. Are you there?
Yeah, you cut out there briefly.
Yeah, I know the connection isn't great for some reason. But what was I saying? Yeah, but I think he influenced them greatly in that kind of way, and applying the dialogue, the Platonic dialogue or the Socratic method to everything, and then he would use it to reason that against arguments against religion, which maybe you would agree with. I don't know, but I feel like he greatly influenced them with that one. But yeah, they always leave out the part that it ends in a religious message or a spiritual message.
Yeah, the problem with Stefan Molyneux specifically is that from the very beginning, he really emphasized how philosophy will lead you to conclusions that are inarguable, essentially. And the problem with that, when you present yourself in that way, that means that you can never change your mind on anything. Because if you've said that you have come to a conclusion through philosophy, and this conclusion is so solid in terms of the way it was arrived at that it can't be challenged, you can't then turn around and change your mind, because it means that that's not true. And Stefan Molyneux did that because very early on he was making videos calling spirituality and religion a mind virus. But then as he became more involved in the traditional right wing, I guess you would call it, he suddenly softened his approach to religion. So it's like, which is it? Which is the truly inarguable philosophical approach?
Yeah. I mean, he was okay. He did some okay things, but I actually read him off quite early on because I saw him make a video where he was speaking in defense of McDonald's. And this one video, he was defending in a sort of libertarian argument, McDonald's and Justin Bieber and McDonald's. I was like, what the hell is this crap? So I took with a grain of salt everything he said ever since, because I could see he was a guy that would employ a certain, not dishonesty, but he would employ an argumentative method to whatever suited him. And let's say I was trusting my instincts. I know when somebody, you can make positive arguments for McDonald's. I'm not sure what they are. Cheap food, I guess, is that whatever. It just seems to me like right away you're making excuses for things that everybody knows instinctually are bad or evil even. But yeah. But you had an original point with this, or was that your point with the skeptics, that they use?
Yeah, it's just the way they misuse these ancient philosophers, because it sounds impressive to name drop Plato and Aristotle, but it's very evident that they've never taken the time to read them.
Yeah. It can be a daunting task to read all of Plato anyways, that's for sure. And Aristotle's even worse. I mean, a lot of it is daunting, but it's good. You get through it. I feel like you absorb it subconsciously, even if you don't fully understand it the first time around or all of it. because it's heavy, and the way it's written is kind of, especially Aristotle, more than Plato, I thought.
Well, the reason I got interested in Plato in the first place was because of the subject of Atlantis. So the Timaeus and the Critias were the first two works of his that I read. And frankly, there's a lot of things that Plato deals with that I'm not interested in. The ideal society, I just don't care about that. It's not something I would ever take the time to study. But,
well, Pierre Grimes, the philosopher.
Sorry?
Pierre Grimes, he's a philosopher. Maybe you wouldn't know
the
him.
name rings a bell, but I'm not familiar with him.
He has a theory that the Republic is actually about, I mean, I don't know if I ascribe to it, maybe partially, maybe in a way it's metaphorically could be this as well, that in the Republic he's actually referring to the self, and it's all about how to govern the self. And in fact, he even brings up the word, there's a translated word in Greek, which is, can kind of go either way, that it can either mean self or, not republic, but something. Or so he has a theory that Plato was actually talking about the self, but maybe that's out there. Anyways, but yeah, Atlantis. Do tell. So you have a theory. What's your idea about Atlantis?
Oh, well, that when I was younger, that was my absolute obsession. I don't know why. I was just always interested in it. In the modern day, I'm not prepared to offer any solid ideas about it. I just find the whole idea of lost lands, ancient civilizations, worldly mysteries endlessly fascinating. Yeah.
Well, I like the idea of things that were ancient to them, the way they are ancient to us, and how far back it goes, and how ancient things can be.
Absolutely, because of course Plato wasn't, according to Plato's own words, he wasn't the source of the story of Atlantis. It was his ancestor Solon who got the story from a priest in Sais, Egypt, and that story to that Egyptian priest was ancient. And he said to Solon at the time, "Oh, Solon, you Greeks are all children. You think there has been one catastrophe, but really there's been several." And the priest, according to Plato, expressed this view, a rather Vedic view actually, that the world goes through these cycles of destruction and rebirth and destruction and rebirth. It's very fascinating. Even now I'm getting interested just speaking about it.
It is. It's amazing. It's great. It's absolutely great. No, it's true. It's amongst the best and like really primeval stuff. So would you say then we're in a Kali Yuga?
Oh, I don't know about things like that. I don't concern myself with things like that. Okay, that's one of the liberties of my position, is that I don't have to pretend to know things I don't know. I don't have to hope I give an intelligent answer on things I don't know anything about. I just say I don't know or I don't care. One of the two.
That's good. Yeah, I don't know or I don't care. Yeah, I should employ that often. That's good. Yeah, I recall when I was talking to that Hindu friend of mine. He said, "Yes, we are in the Kali Yuga, but his starting point for it was what shocked me. He said it started like, I can't remember now, 10,000 years ago or something."
I thought you were going to say a year ago.
No, it started like a long time. Well, apparently it lasts a very long time. If we are in it and it's true, it's really quite a sinister thing, which again, you can just laugh at and like, okay, whatever, what can we do? Here we go. It's out of our hands. Just enjoy yourself. But
I really think that I'm too indifferent to return to that word. I'm too indifferent to the fate of the world and my own fate to really get invested in that kind of thing. That's one thing I noticed as I was going through this process, as you might call it, is that even in terms of films, so much drama in films is centered around the physical death of certain characters. But if you don't take physical death seriously, even in little areas, minor areas like that, you can't really, it's hard to get invested in that drama because it's just death. So it's often hard for me to relate to the things that people are deeply concerned with, because the fate of the world and even the fate of my own mortal form is just not among them.
Yeah, that's true, right. It's hard to be completely detached. And I don't know. I wouldn't say it is good to be that way, for sure. I don't know that I would I do have more of a myself connection to reality that I intentionally harbor and encourage and am happy with, and even the pleasures of life. And I like certain limits of pain and pain and labor and things as a test, and I take it mirthfully, let's say. So even if I fail, it's kind of hilarious, or I try to take it as a challenge and try to enjoy it as it's out of my hands anyway, or why not? What's the difference? Who cares? So it's sort of indifference, but at the same time, I do enjoy the world, and I do.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I absolutely love. To quote from that great sage Robbie Williams, I don't mind dying. I just don't want to. Because I do enjoy life. I enjoy doing lots of things in life, but I'm just not. I don't fear the things that others fear. The death of the planet and things like that. These are just, first of all, they're inevitable. So you can't escape it. We're all going to die. The planet will one day die. And sure, if you can do good in the meantime, then do good. If you can help in the meantime,
Well,
then help. But
you
I'm
might
not
be
going
able
to get
to, you might be
emotionally
able to escape
invested.
it. You might be able to escape it if you go into space, and maybe you can escape that part until the solar system dies and then the galaxy dies. But that's always an interesting possibility, that ascendancy idea of mankind. That's a potential to escape the biosphere and to grow, in that sense. Not, I wouldn't dare say godlike, but to increase our, what's the, not power or dominion, but to ascend in that way. But you wouldn't put much into that.
Maybe we will. Maybe we will. I don't know. Maybe humanity will.
You would be 100% indifferent if we, like, the whole world just exploded tomorrow, or as opposed to we made a solar empire, a galactic empire like Star Wars. You would be
Yeah.
you wouldn't care either way.
There's no difference to me at all.
Really, you wouldn't feel anything, nothing.
No, again, this is why it's sometimes hard for me to relate, because I'm just as the New Testament says, the world is passing away. Time is a measure of change, and change is bound to the material realm, and so it's already dead in a sense. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just reality, But I'm a perfectly, as I keep, when I express things like this, especially to people in real life, they'll say things like, well, that sounds depressing. But it's like, well, you know me. You know I'm the most happy, content person. So
no, I don't think it's depressing. I just think it's a bit strange to have no future hopes, or beyond your death, beyond yourself or something. Maybe, I don't know. Or not strange, I shouldn't say that, but I know.
I do have an interest. I mean, if I could be told what humanity will be like in 1,000 years, yeah, I'd be interested in seeing that. But it's not going to, if humanity dies off, I'm not going to psychologically break because of it.
No, that's true. Yeah, so it's good. Yeah, it's a good way to be prepared for anything, because anything can and will happen. There'll be great highs and great lows. That's what
exactly.
I'm sure.
That's the adventure. That's why consciousness came here in the first place, to play this game and have this fun. And I certainly do have fun. But it's much more fun when you're not so invested in this idea of yourself as a human being, as this egoic intellectual construct.
Yeah. Well, that would be where we differ, because I do enjoy investing in it for whatever reason, even though I would also see your point of view and agree with it. I do also enjoy investing in it. So whatever that means for me and my place in this cycle, I don't know.
Oh, I understand that too. As I like to say, the one who is no one is everyone. If you can transcend this egoic limitation, then you can likewise choose to reinvest yourself anytime you want. And again, consciousness likes to experience. Consciousness likes to play this game. So it's not to say that the game is bad. It's just about recognizing what you are and what you are not. And once you have that recognition, then play the game however you like.
Right. And do you have any surefire way? This has just occurred to me. It's kind of apart from what we were just talking about. I'm just thinking again of my relative. I don't know why he popped in my mind, but do you have any particular method or way to approach someone who, say, is trapped in that particular incarnation of their ego, to break them out of it? Do you have any methods? Like, you know what I mean?
If they're not willing to listen to explanations like the one I gave earlier, because based on what you said about your relative, it doesn't seem like they'd be prepared to listen.
No, he's a raving atheist, so anything remotely spiritual, he would just discount immediately. I know that.
Right. So the suffering of the material realm is what will ultimately bring, because that's what does it in the end. Eventually, souls, while for a time they enjoy being invested in this egoic identity, they enjoy the experience of the world, they enjoy their place in the world, eventually through suffering, whether major or minor, they grow tired of it. And at that point, they begin to ask, what is this all about? They begin to ask the so-called big questions, and that starts them off on the process of what I call remembrance, remembering their true nature as spirit, essentially.
Right. So he can only do it himself, which is what I thought. I just stayed away from. I've said nothing to him, but yeah, he can probably only do it himself. But it seems like a trap, anyways. To like, I remember that about other people too in the past. I remember a guy complaining, a good friend of mine, and he sort of he adopted, like, this sounds, I'm not sure I can explain this. It might sound silly. He adopted a certain personality through, like, this is when we were a lot younger, through partying, let's say. And he was very fun at parties, and he would be a hard partier, and we would have a good time. He sort of adopted a perpetually funny, happy party guy personality. And I remember at one point, years later, he was bemoaning this to me, that he like couldn't escape it. Like, he felt obliged to be like this all the time, even though he was kind of wearying of it. And it was just kind of funny because it was like he seemed so happy and jovial, but inside he was like, no, I'm tired of this. I don't want to feel like I have to be this way. So that's another funny example, I guess.
Absolutely. People trap themselves in these ideas that they can let go of at any time they want.
Yeah. You have to. That's why you can't corner yourself in these things and think, I am this, I must be this always. And especially I found that if you are truer to that more innocent self, the original self, as much as you can anyways, you can go through these things and adapt, take in parts of them that you need or want, and for a time, or leave them and come and go more, and work your way through it and not become so attached to something, especially when, because everything has this time. I think everything has this day, and then it kind of fades, and it has a necessity for the moment that can be useful or otherwise. So if you can remain somewhat aloof or apart from it and not overinvest in things to do with behavior, which I think you would agree with.
Absolutely, because the moment you overinvest in things, you take both yourself and therefore by extension life too seriously, and therefore everything that life throws at you therefore seems of the deepest consequence when it's really not. But if you can retain this understanding of yourself as consciousness, you're always viewing the world and everything that unfolds from a detached distance, and it's I can life is just better that way. It's yeah.
Well, it's a very Neoplatonic, anyways, I think, and that's very much what Plotinus would be on about, where with reason being the highest, the plane of reason, which is beyond the plane of fire, which is the true godlike attainment, is pure reason. Which would be.
I have a friend called Jim who was once a Buddhist, but he actually rejected Buddhism to become a Neoplatonist, as he would call it. But Plotinus is essentially the one he really focuses on, his understandings. And it's just, there was a time where I wouldn't have understood that trajectory, to go from Buddhism to Plotinus, but now I fully understand it.
I don't actually understand Buddhism that well. I don't know if you have any insights to that. I find it hard to grasp. It's sort of the same as what you would believe, where you're sort of grasping for nothingness, as it were. Maybe it's the same kind of idea, nothingness being...
Emptiness in their tradition, yeah.
Emptiness, sorry. Which is the eternal thing. So their emptiness is just like shedding emotion and shedding concern and shedding reality? Is that...
Well, I can't speak for Buddhism, but I certainly know that when Buddhists hear me speak, they understand exactly what I'm saying. They relate it easily to their tradition. Fundamentally, I try to avoid categories, but what I'm expressing, this mysticism that I'm expressing, it would be called non-dualism, and it's more of a Hindu thing. But of course, Buddha himself was a Hindu before he... In fact, he died as a Hindu, essentially. He didn't renounce Hinduism. Right. He just found a certain path that he felt was more balanced in terms of the way one approaches life.
Yeah. I mean, like Alan Watts was big into the Buddhism too, and a lot of people have been. I read a book about Baron Sternberg, and it was all about the early Buddhism, which was very much more a fierce it seemed to be a fiercer pagan thing with lots of war gods and blood rituals and things.
Well,
But
if you if you look at the Dhammapada, which is a collection of Buddha's sayings or alleged sayings of Buddha, that is filled with, from Buddha's own mouth, with this idea of gods and dark gods and afterlives and dark afterlives. It doesn't sound like the kind of Buddhism that a lot of people express, but there it is in plain writing if anyone wants to read it.
yeah, fascinating. Yeah, it's not the sort of thing the hippie expects to encounter after he shaved his head and he's converted.
Oh yeah, Buddhism is one of those traditions that many people in the West adopt, but it's not. It's more of a light form of the tradition. It's not really,
without understanding it, probably. Yeah. So I don't know. I've tried to. That's one I should study more, as the Buddhism. I am interested in it. But like so what is, you were saying you get a certain grief. So dare I ask what? And I feel like I can already guess the answer. So what religious group gives you the most grief for your views? Is it Christianity?
Yeah, I think it is Christianity, but I don't think that's because there's anything especially vicious about Christians. I just think it's because I'm speaking in a Western context and I'm using Christian terminology. So on the one hand, I'm attracting Christians to my videos, but then when they hear what I have to say, they're like, "No, I don't like this."
Yeah. Because there's a lot of. It depends on the person, I guess, though. But because we are speaking, and I myself, I'm always speaking from a Western perspective, and obviously, I mean, so I also get a lot of grief from them if they expect they believe Christianity is the basis for everything in our world. If they're of that type that are so sort of fundamentalist about it, and they reject Greece and Rome and the other Western artifacts of Western culture, and it's kind of strange. I don't quite understand how they. But I guess they have to if they want to live in that dualism and understand the world in that plain black and white, heaven and hell, forbidden and good format.
I don't think many of them know just how much what they call Orthodox Christianity was informed by the ancient philosophers. And it's very obvious to me that they're not familiar with many great minds of their tradition that would see reason in what in what someone like yourself would say. For example, they're just the honest truth is about so many religionists online is that it goes back to the ego again. They like to conceive of themselves as being the Templar Knight, the Crusader, what have you, but that's really as deep as it goes. And so they like being dogmatic online. They like asserting dogmatic things, but they don't. In my experience, they rarely have, and almost never have, a deep understanding of their own tradition, because it's not as if their tradition was always filled with fools. There have been many great minds to come out of Catholicism and Protestantism, but they just don't represent them and they don't know about them.
It's a strange business. It's strange to have that. It's that what someone else described it as chosenism, that I'm the chosen, you're not, or they want to be part of a select group, or
absolutely. Tribal politics definitely is a massive part as well. Every soul wants to feel that they belong because they feel secure in that, and I understand that. But
well, Christianity very clear. The sort of religions we're talking about, Neoplatonism. I mean, maybe Buddhism is different because there's a long, rich tradition. Maybe it's in between those two things. But say Christianity really much outlines everything for you in your life, what you can and can't do, what you should or shouldn't do. It's sort of, if you're the type of person that needs that direction, doesn't feel it within, it's there for you, it's outlined, and you can follow it. And that's it, I guess. And there's pros and cons to that. Everything has its pros and cons, So
it's nice to have that easily referenced structure,
Yeah. And we came from it, whether we like it or not. You and I, even no matter how aloof you are, it's in and you know that, I'm sure you would admit that. That's in our morality and our worldview.
Absolutely. When I had that spiritual experience that I related earlier, the one that set me off on this path, immediately afterwards, I was left with the feeling that the one known as Jesus Christ had been responsible for it. And I knew perfectly well from that moment that was almost certainly because I was raised within a Western context. If I'd been raised in India, I may well have attributed it to Krishna. And so even though I was never a Christian myself, I understand well the way that the Western world and its Christian history has influenced me. But I also recognize that what's important is not the name, be it Yeshua, Jesus, Krishna, or anything else. What's important is what is being referred to. And so, yeah. Yeah, I'm very sorry. The point is that, yeah, I'm absolutely very aware of my own biases and influences in terms of culture.
Yeah, I mean, we can't escape it, and it's so it always, so that's the flip side to our little personal dichotomy, in that we can't escape that, nor should we necessarily want to, because even part of our exploration of spirituality must be tied into that origin morality somehow. And I have another weird theory I'll tell you about, which I don't know, or I'll ask you what you think about. And I've noticed in things is that in religion, not just in anything, and particularly in religions or ideas, anything, there is dichotomy. It's innate in the nature of a thing in this cosmos to have a certain dichotomy and a flip side, right? And that I think, I could be wrong, my theory is that the stronger this dichotomy, the stronger the thing. So let's say, for example, the way that Christianity took off in Europe and overcame paganism, being this foreign religion, is very strange and dichotomous. And you would think that would be a great negative towards it, being this, religion from a foreign land, talking about peoples and lands far away. But that weirdness, that dichotomy, that the dichotomy, or the maybe dichotomy isn't the best word. The
duality, that's the word I would use.
Duality, or the paradox, let's say, of that problem somehow only strengthens the thing. Now, this is very odd and strange theory, but there's duality in everything. What do you think about that? Am I making can I get this point across, or does it sound just silly?
Well, as far as duality is concerned, that's something that's very important to my perspective, because it's the duality and the diversity that consciousness manifests in the material realm to experience in the first place. I very much see, for example, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the story of the Garden of Eden in Genesis as being symbolic of duality. And Adam and Eve's choice to eat of the fruit of that tree is a choice to enter into duality. And therefore, after that, Adam is forced to work by the sweat of his brow. Eve has pain in childbirth, and so on, because that's the consequence of entering into the duality of the material realm. But as for your idea that
the stronger the opposition in the duality, the stronger the thing as a whole.
Yeah, that is an idea that is new to me, so I'd have to consider it. But it's certainly very, very interesting.
Yeah, because that's like the yin yang thing, which is a very ancient idea as well. I mean, that was found on old Roman shields and things. That's not just like a Chinese thing. So, but I don't know if this is my own personal idea. Maybe someone else has come up with this, and I don't know if there's any truth to it or there's any way to prove it. But it's sort of like anywhere you see things that seem out of place, where in the modern context they would remove it to make like think of say a Norse myth. There's plenty of Norse myths. There's Odin or Thor are very manly guys. They're doing lots of killing and drinking and eating and everything, just hyper manly guys all the time, except for the few odd stories where they dress as women. And there's like a couple where they dress up as women for some stupid reason. And it doesn't make sense. So in the modern sense, say in modern times, if those were being made into a movie, Disney or something, they would just simply take those parts out because they're incongruous. But if you look at the myth on its own, if you go back to the myth, and it would be useless, then it would be dead. It'd be this perfect pap story that it'd be perfect then in a way, and that would make it dead. Is my point. Where in the original story, this strange paradox of that somehow strengthens it. It makes it weirder, and inexplicably.
Are we perhaps talking about the effects of a juxtaposition, an immediate contrast?
Maybe, but that's not entirely like it. Yeah, juxtaposition, contrast. Yeah, contrast is, and it brings it out by showing the other in a more light. But it's more like it needs it. It's not just that the opposite. It's just like the opposite is needed and the stronger the opposition, the stronger the thing. This is my theory. That's the only way I can explain it.
This is a highly interesting. Would you say, or could you be tempted to say, or would you think in the direction of maybe this says something about the virtue of balance? The fact that, because I was just thinking back to Buddha there, he famously had his middle way, where he rejected the extremes that came from the Hindu tradition and forged a more balanced path. But now that I'm saying that, I'm thinking I'm actually going away from your initial point. I'm not sure,
balance,
actually.
Yeah, balance is important, and balance is something else, though, I think, because balance. This is more like the extremes come together, and is strengthened by the extreme. If the one extreme wasn't there, the thing on its own would not be as powerful. And it's not to do with balance, because balance is more like a conduct method, which is good and true. Plato also went on, and Aristotle went on about balance quite a bit, harmony. And that's the best way to go about things. But as in terms of what exists in the world, and say powers in the world, which others would describe as gods, these currents of power, things out of human control altogether, let's say.
Could we be talking about a way that something is defined, something that is fundamental to the way something is defined? So let me give you an example. Donald Trump, as you know, will soon be out of office. Now, there are many souls in this world who have constructed their identity essentially around hatred of him. And it's very obvious that those souls are already feeling lost without that hate figure there to project all of their fears onto and so forth. Right. So could that be an example of what you're talking about? And this is a highly interesting conversation to me, because it's been a long time since I've had a discussion where, I've wanted to dig down and really, really get to the heart of what's being said.
Oh, well, I'm flattered. Yeah. It sort of is, but not exactly in that. Yeah. In the sense maybe that they were stronger when he was there and there'll be nothing without him. Sort of. Yes.
It's like at the end of Conan the Barbarian when Thulsa Doom gives that speech to Conan.
Yes, I'm the wellspring from which you flow. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it's more like its application is weirder. Like those examples I gave of myths. It came to me when I was reading more and more of the old myths, not just the Nordic, the Irish especially are very weird, and Scottish. I'm sure the Celtic myths. I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff in that. You know what I mean? Things that would be totally incongruous that you would not include in something like that, were it being made today, that it was being made, or how can I say this? Just like those examples I gave are some of the best I can think of. The strangeness about Christianity being that it would be so powerful, but at its heart, it would be like this foreign religion that really shouldn't even be here. And why is it so powerful? Or that example again in the Norse, there's in the Irish ones, I can think of the weird things that make, like the fact that the Dagda in the Irish myths has these enormous genitals that drag on the ground wherever he goes. I mean, it sounds ridiculous. It just sounds stupid. And, it's just obscene. But then if you remove that from the story, like Disneyfy it, as my other example, and it loses some of that magical craziness that makes it stronger. So it's very vague and very hard to explain.
Well, there is something that Christian evangelicals talk about a lot, especially in the context of discussing the absurdity of Christianity, because the Apostle Paul in the book of Romans, he goes on this long talk about how the message of the cross is an offense to Jews, it's an affront to Greeks and so forth. So could it be that there's power in something that is outrageous, that it's almost a sense of it's so outrageous that
that's part of it, but there should be an element in it that seems like it really shouldn't be there, and you should feel like affronted by it, and that element will make it stronger.
Well, that's exactly, because to go back to Christianity, the idea, the Jews expecting the Messiah, most Jews expected a warlord, essentially, one that would conquer their enemies. So when the early Christians went out and they said, no, Yeshua was the Messiah and he was crucified by his enemies, that's an example of the kind of element you're just talking about, where no, that shouldn't be there. That the opposite was supposed to happen, and yet somehow that makes it powerful. Are we getting somewhere here?
Exactly. It's this thing, whatever it is, like just all we have is examples. We don't have anything else to go by, and it's very vague and strange. But I feel like it's something in the world, maybe. That certainly, and it relates simply to me dwelling on things like I keep bringing up, like the Disneyfication of a story, of it taking, like the way they would remove from a myth those things which seem incongruous or out of place or, paradoxical, and then you end up with a dead nothing thing. It's just the fact that it needs that. It has to be there. So that's kind of that yin yang thing. And the more it is, the better the thing. So
And as you said, if you do remove those elements, you do kind of kill it. So you talked about like Disney, for example. I mean, even like the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, they're pretty twisted in their own way. And yet, if they're retold in the modern day, they're very sanitized. And as you said, it just kind of strips them of their power.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They must have that. Even though that's a great example. Paradoxical, because it's a child's fairy tale. It's meant to be full of innocence. And you've got, these horrible, there's many people getting eaten, and there's many stories of cannibalism in there's all kinds of things in there, like things you wouldn't think to tell children. But they are a great example. And when you can easily excuse that stuff in terms of just the stories themselves, and that, it's preparing children for a harsh world or something. But like a modern child's tale, saccharine, and so empty of any reality. There's no point in telling them anything. I mean, you want to prepare them for a world that has harsh elements. You don't want to just take all that out because you're terrified of frightening them. That again would be the babyish way of treating people in the world, I think. I mean, you don't want to do it. You can't just like sit down and show them the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or something. But you want to, have some. You want to inject some of those little, and they're cool things. It's what makes the world interesting and cool as well. What would be this reality without any? If everything was just in stasis, if there was no conflict, what would we be except like rocks floating through space in stasis? Like, what's the point of doing anything here?
Exactly.
And any kind of action or movement requires that yin yang, back and forth, push pull, and it's just the way it is, and it's good as well. And one day you'll be crushed, but whatever.
One of my favorite films growing up is Jason and the Argonauts. I love those Ray Harryhausen films. I love stop motion effects.
Oh, it's the best.
But what's funny is the actual story of Jason. It's just the actual myth is so messed up. Like, for example, in the film, Jason meets Medea, and they have a typical Hollywood romance, and that's it. But in the actual myth, this is just one thing I remember. When Jason and Medea are escaping, Medea cuts up the king's brother and throws pieces of him into the sea so that the king that's pursuing them will stop to pick up the pieces. Yeah. And it's like, you're not going to see that in a Hollywood film anytime soon.
And later she kills their kids.
She does, and escapes to Asia on a dragon, apparently.
Yeah. I mean, it's not all just... And I believe Jason, there's two versions of the death of Jason. One is that he's, after all the heroism and all the adventures, this is what's great about Greek myths, is they totally embrace this. And any true old myths. Anyways, he was sitting by the ship, what was it called? The Argos. And a plank fell off the ship and hit him on the head and killed him. Or the other version is that
mundane.
There's another version where he's at the Olympic Games and a discus thrower throws a disc and it hits him. The disc goes through the crowd and hits him in the head and kills him. So he has this totally like everyman death after all that adventure, which is, but that's a good example that totally strengthens the story in that weird, incongruous way, doesn't it? The weirdness of it
does. And another obvious example is Hercules, how his whole 12 tasks in the actual myth, that all began because he slaughtered his family in a rage.
Oh, and, well, in a madness came over him. He was definitely Hera made him mad for a night or hour or something.
Yeah, because he was the child of Zeus and some mortal human, and Hera was always rather unfairly punishing these human women and their offspring for what Zeus made them do beyond their power.
Yeah. But that's a good way to set up the world in a myth or in a religion too, I think. Because there's that kind of thing is in the Christian religion as well. Like the wrathfulness of God in the Old Testament and the things he does and says is not so far from that anyways. That kind of like human anthropomorphic, emotional response to things. Like I think of the gods, like I said, as like currents of power hidden in the world, pushing these things like that move through things and create causation, whatever their motive or things or whatever. I don't know. It's beyond any reckoning. but that there is a visible. You can like if you can notice a pattern, you're noticing a passing current of a kind, and maybe in the old days, the wizards of old or found a way to exploit or guess where the current would go, kind of thing, which is what maybe we're doing by theorizing on this bizarre yin yang theory. This is my idea. This is all very crazy and strange. Yeah, that's it, I guess.
Yeah, well, I've thoroughly enjoyed this discussion. I didn't have a clue what to expect, but I've really, really enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, it was good. Yeah. It was really, really good talking to you. Yeah, lots of interesting things. So, but yeah, we'll stop there. We're going on 2 hours, so that's long enough.
Okay, great. So I'll be up in a couple of days. Did you say?
Yeah, maybe even depends how long it takes me because I have to go through it, and I think there's 1 or 2 parts I wanted to cut out there, and wasn't there something I wanted to cut out? Yeah, I may or may not. We'll see. I remember the one part now. I may, because it's slightly political. I may want to. I don't know. I'll decide at the time. I may leave it.
Oh yeah, that was about the feminized Western world. I think it was.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's dangerous right now to even say stuff like that. So I don't know, but I'll decide at the time. So if I do that, it might take a couple days. If it's quick and easy, it could even be tomorrow. But I'll let you know anyways.
All right, great. I'll keep an eye out. I'm subscribed to you anyway, so I'm sure I'll see it.
Yeah, great. So that was good, and great talking to you. And we'll be in touch. I'll talk to you again about spiritual matters.
Yeah, thanks very much. It was a very enjoyable conversation. So
yeah, it was great. Yeah. Okay, David.
Right.
We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
See ya.